B, marker. And action.
This podcast is being recorded at the Motion Picture Institute, the oldest film school in Michigan, training the next generation of filmmakers today. Check out the website motionpicture.edu and schedule a tour now. All right, and welcome back to the show. Today I have an exciting guest, someone that is a little full circle for me. Charles Kennedy Jr. is a cinematographer and image maker based in Detroit, Michigan. Charles studied media communication at Lawrence Technological University with a focus in audio engineering, but he discovered the world of film production after participating in the 2010 Detroit-Windsor International Film Festival. He's worked with major brands like HAP Michigan, Compassion International, Michigan State University, and Cliff Bell's, the famed jazz club in Detroit. His journey has taken him through working in several departments, but camera has always been a constant. Charles has landed several independent feature films, short film projects, and commercials. Charles is known for his deep focus for psychological storytelling through an image with lighting, compassion, and his care with photographing black skin. So, without further ado, welcome to the show, and let's talk motion picture. Charles, I am so glad that you're here, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I do want to cut back to my statement earlier where I said like full circle.
Mm-hmm.
You know this already, but I want everyone who's listening to know.
Yeah.
When I moved to the States back in November of 2019, I went on Instagram and typed Detroit film, like a hashtag, and you were one of the first options that like popped up. And you seemed like I took you by surprise.
Yeah, no, it did.
But I mean, with everything that you've done and you continue to do, I don't think it is that surprising.
You know what? I think it is, just for me, it's surprising just because I'm still so in it and I'm still, like, I feel like I'm still trying to find my path. So to know that whatever path that I've carved out to the point to where I am now, that someone can find me like that, it just, I don't know, like, I still feel like I'm underwater, like, trying to figure it out. So the fact that you found me is just like, whoa, I haven't popped out yet. I'm still trying to figure it out.
And I didn't make any contact because I was like, I'm like nobody. I'm not going to try. But I was inspired by your work. I definitely, for everyone listening, the part that really caught my attention was there was a post you made on Instagram for your feature film, Affliction. Mm-hmm. And it was a screen grab of Philip Sean Devon, who plays the lead in that film.
Yeah, shout out Phil.
Yeah, please, shout out Phil.
Yeah, I love Phil, man.
The way you had him lit, and I'll throw the screen grab if I have your permission. I'll throw it up here.
Absolutely.
It just looks so legit. Like it looks phenomenal. And I remember looking at that image and going, dude, that's a movie star. Like I have to work with that guy, which I thankfully was able to at some point. I was able to work with Phil in a short film that I made here at MPI. But I remember being taken back by like the quality. And I'm like, damn, so this is local. That's cool. And so I've kind of like kept an eye on you and Zachary, who I had on the podcast recently. Because I'm like, you guys inspired me with what you were doing locally. And I think what's even more inspiring, and I would love for you to give me a breakdown, is you're majority self-taught.
Yeah.
Right? So how did that kind of play out?
So when I got to Lawrence Tech, because prior to enrolling into college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was, high school, needless to say, I was not the most motivated teenager. Played Xbox. I didn't really get my first job, like real job, until I was 21. So I was just kind of, just whatever, played sports, went to school, played Xbox. That was it. Went out with my friends. We went bowling, go to the mall, the typical teenage stuff. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I was I was going to a church in Pontiac called Door of Faith, and I was working in the audiovisual ministry. And the minister who was over the audio video ministry, he suggested, hey, why don't you go to school for what you're doing here? And I'm like, I didn't know I could do that. Like, I thought I had to go to school for like finance or, to be an engineer. Like, I didn't know I could go to school for broadcast. So looked around for a couple different schools. It was between Central Michigan and Lawrence Tech. I wanted to stay closer to home, so I ended up going to Lawrence Tech, and the program was still relatively new. When I got there, there was one graduating class before me, so I was the second. I think we were the second graduating class of that program by the time I graduated. And so when I got into the program, like my focus was audio. Like I thought I was going to be a sound technician, I was going to travel, be in the studio. Like that was really my focus. But the director of the program at the time, Suzanne Levine, she told me, she said, I'll be more valuable if I learn everything in the program. Like just don't focus on one thing. Like try to learn everything. I'll be more marketable later on getting a job. So I took that to heart. I learned a bunch of different things in the program, learn how to shoot, learn how to cut, learn, how to edit. But photography, there was no photography classes. So everything that I did photography-wise, because all my knowledge is in video, like broadcast, shooting like man on the street, like run and gun EPK type stuff. But the photography was just me walking around campus, just taking pictures on my iPhone. Because I was extremely shy and extremely, I had a lot of social anxiety back then. So I would, walk around campus, take the long way around to get to class and try to avoid like the heavily populated areas. And just to kind of pass the time, like I would walk around my iPhone and just take pictures of whatever I saw. And I would just post them on Instagram and Facebook, and people, like, man, you take beautiful pictures and you should, like keep doing it. I'm like, I'm just taking pictures of what I see. I'm not really trying to, really do this. I'm just passing time. And I eventually bought my first camera. It was a Canon T3i. And yeah, I just like a lot of it was just shooting. YouTube was a big help. I used to watch it's a fashion photographer in New York. It's named Danny Diamond. I used to watch his stuff like religiously. And a lot of it was just trial and error, man. Trial and error, just going out and shooting. I have a ton of pictures with just a bunch of people just trying different stuff, like just experimenting, doing different things. So yeah, a lot of my experience is just me going out, just doing it.
And then at some point you decided to get into filmmaking. Mm-hmm. So what was that? What is the instigator of that?
So I have one of my classmates at Lawrence Tech, Jeff Wolka. He was doing a 48-hour film challenge. They had done, I think it was a Go Green. At the time, it was called Go Green film challenge, like an eco-friendly, film challenge where they encourage you to write stories that are like talking about the environment and, that are eco-friendly, that type of thing. So in the program, I was the only guy in the program who had any knowledge of sound, who, really had like a skill base in that. So he reached out to me and, he asked me if I would be interested in coming on to the team to be sound guy. And of course, I'm like, oh, man, I don't know. Shy, like, maybe. But something just, like Jeff is just such a really nice and like he just made me feel so comfortable that I just felt like I could say yes. So I said yes. And, the experience was like I kind of went, all in on the experience because you write, you shoot, and you edit all in 48 hours.
Wait, your first film experience was a 48-hour competition?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, my first one, it was Go Green. It was the Go Green Film Challenge. Man,
it's just like what a trial by combat sort of situation.
Yeah. Like looking back at it, I'm like, no, that was like I would not recommend anyone a 48-hour film challenge as your first thing. Like,
I was about to say, like, that was probably like I did a 48-hour film challenge, and that was probably like the third thing I did.
Yeah, that was my first experience, but it was a good experience though. Like, it was a good experience, and I just like it opened the world up to me because I'm like, we can make a movie, and we don't have to be in Hollywood, and we can do it in a weekend. Like, this is crazy. Like, and you're shooting with the camera that, like I eventually bought a similar camera, but you're just shooting with a regular, a DSLR. Like, we can just get some people together and do this. And so that was kind of the first, like, my first exposure. And then we did another one later that summer, and then we did another one in the fall, and it just stuck. And then I just started doing my own stuff, and I kept doing the 48s for a while, and it just, eventually just kept progressing. But yeah, it was a 48-hour film challenge. That was my first experience.
So now you get into photography.
Mm-hmm.
That instigates the 48 hours. You get into filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
When does Affliction come around?
Ooh, which one? So there's two.
Because it starts with the short film, right? Mm-hmm. I have not seen the short film. I've only seen the feature film. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to Affliction, like, what instigates the writing? Because you wrote that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when did you shoot that? And then what was the road to the feature from that?
So the short was prior to the short, I'd got my first corporate job at Roush Performance. About 2016 was around that time. But before I got that job, I tried making Affliction twice. The first time I tried, I think we had everything in place and we ended up losing like a location, and I just kind of walked away from it, said, forget about it. And then the second time I tried, and I think that was around the time when I got the job, and I said, okay, you know what, this isn't, like, let me just focus on this, make some money, try to, get my own place. Like, let me try to get things, get myself, started, as an adult. And so when I was working at Roush, I thought, I'm like, man, I'm just gonna do this. Like, I'm just gonna work here and, like, go this route. It's safe. I have insurance. I'm making good money, corporate cars. We travel. Like, I'm like, this is much better than the struggle that I was going through with filmmaking, with doing the 48s and trying to do Affliction and that falling apart twice. And so in 2017, my grandma passed away. She had dementia. And my grandma was she was like my second mom. Like, I spent a ton of time at her house. She practically, she helped raise me. And I was real close to my grandma, and I took it really hard, really, really hard. And so her dying just kind of sent me into a tailspin, and I needed an outlet. This was before I ever started therapy, any of that. And so I'm like, let me pick Affliction back up. And what inspired the story, just period, was I'd watched the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix and Amy Adams, like back in 2014. And Amy Adams had a line in the film. She said, love is a socially acceptable form of insanity. And so my mind took that, and I was going through I'd gone through a real bad heartbreak at the time. So I'm, just really in my head and my feelings all the time. So I'm like, man, what is a socially acceptable form of what I do? Like, what is that? What is the equivalent of a writer? Like, we hear voices all the time. Like, we imagine things, we see things other people don't see. Is that like schizophrenia? Is that what that's like? Am I like? So then I started doing research on it, on the condition, and then just mental illness, just period. And that's where I landed. That was my canvas. So I wrote a film about a writer who is battling schizophrenia and how that affects his day-to-day life. And so that's how the script came about. And so when my grandma passed away from dementia, which, is a mental, that's a mental thing, it's inside out, that's what inspired me to pick it back up. And we produced the short. I stuck with it. We had some issues with the short too, trying to get that done, but I stuck with it and did it. And my goal was always to make a feature from the short. From the beginning, I was like, I'm gonna do this, gonna use it as a proof of concept. Then I'm gonna eventually make the feature. But the feature didn't come until 2019, I think, is when we went into production. The end of 2019. Yeah, because it was right before the pandemic.
And sorry, what year was the short made?
The short was made, was it 2017?
Okay.
I think, yeah. 2017, we shot it. Yeah, we shot it in the summer of 2017. And then I kind of sat on it for like 6 months, finished it, premiered it in 2018. And then 2019, the fall of 2019 is when we did the feature.
So now, with the short, was the goal to use it? You say proof of concept. Was the goal to like try find funding with it, or?
Yeah, it was. And of course, at the time, I knew nothing about any of that. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm looking at guys like Damien Chazelle and Barry Jenkins, who had, Damien Chazelle specifically, who had done Whiplash, and he did a short, and then he turned that into the feature. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do that too. And didn't know anything about about financing, where to find it, who to talk to. Crowdfunding was still like a foreign thing to me. Zach had actually opened my eyes to like seeing that crowdfunding was a viable thing when he did a Seed and Spark campaign for Right On back in 2018. But I'm like, man, I thought I was gonna make the short and, you know, do a couple festivals with it, get, you know, some kind of success, and then hopefully that'll help finance the feature. But yeah, that was the idea behind it, was trying to see if we can show someone like, hey, this is what we can do for not much. Like, if you give us some money, imagine what we can do for that. But
Do you mind me asking what the budget was for Affliction?
for the feature,
Yeah.
I think I ended up spending $7,000.
Was that all self-financed?
Yeah, it was all out of pocket.
And then what was
No, I did a crowdfunding campaign. I think I made $1,500, and then the rest was out of pocket.
Okay. And then what was the shoot schedule like? How many days did you shoot for?
So we did what was it, 11 days, but we did weekends. So we did we broke it up across it was supposed to be three weekends. It was supposed to be it was originally 9 days, and then I had 3 days on the end as pickups just in case. So we only ended up using Yeah, that's right. It was 3 weekends. No, 4 weekends. It was 4 weekends. And then I had 3 days on another weekend just in case if we needed it. So it ended up being, it was 13 days, I believe. That's how we did it. And we did it from October into November.
And what do you say is the biggest thing you learned from that experience?
There's a lot of lessons from Affliction.
Spoken like everybody who made their first feature, right?
One, that you don't need a lot of money to make something. I think that was the biggest lesson I learned, which Affliction helped inform our future projects. Like when I did Affliction, that was a big risk because, I had just met, Zach and I had just met. He had just did Right On with, I think they raised a nice amount of money to make that. So me coming along and being like, oh man, I'm going to try to make this film for no money was just like the opposite of what he had just done with Right On, and then subsequently with Little Church. Like he, raised quite a bit of money with that too. So me trying to do this with Affliction was just like, okay, I'm breaking rules here. Like because I wanted to make it for $30,000, but we raised $1,500. So it was like, okay, how do I make this work with what I have, and how much can I put into this out of my own pocket? How many favors can I pull? Who do I know? Pulling contacts together. Like, okay, can we do this? Can we do that? Let me cut deals with you. Let me barter. So, really, the biggest lesson was you don't have to have a lot of money. If you have, was able to get access to a camera, was able to get access to lenses, was able to get into locations. The camera situation, that was an interesting thing in and of itself, because we were going to do something totally different. But Zach was my voice of reason, and he talked me out of the original plan, and I'm so happy he did, because if we joke about it all the time that if we had gone with the original idea, we would still be shooting to this day. Like we'll still be trying to shoot to this day. But yeah, the biggest lesson was you don't need a lot of money to try to make something, good, especially if you give yourself time, you have a team who buys into what you're trying to do. And you have a solid script. I mean, really, that's, I've been, writing Affliction, the feature. I've been writing that for well over a year. It had gone through many iterations. A lot of people read it. It went through a big change right before we shot it. So yeah, that's the biggest lesson I think I took from that. There's a litany of them, but the biggest one is you really don't need a lot.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I remember when I saw it, I was just like really blown away. Because when I watched it, you had like a Venmo link up in your, or something like that. Yeah. Not Venmo, sorry, Vimeo.
Vimeo, yeah.
And I remember like watching it and going, damn, like it looked great.
Thank you.
And I was like, so this is possible. Because, a lot of what you do as a filmmaker is you're like, how do I get my stuff to look good? And then also starting at a local scene like Detroit that isn't like a mainstay in the film production realm. I'm like, okay, so this is possible. You can make like insanely good quality. And now sitting here with you, knowing that your budget was only like $7,000, like, this is very inspiring.
Yeah. No, it's, the interesting thing is that I was having a conversation with someone, I forget who it was. But I was saying to them that the films that Zach and I have done together, Affliction, Sentimental Mood, and I Wish I Can See Heaven, all three of those projects were all made for under $20,000. Like, and I think combined, I don't think combined they were made for 25, like together. That's like we've made these three films for nothing. But the constant in all three of them is with Affliction, we did a test shoot. We did a bunch of test shoots. We tested like crazy. With Sentimental Mood, Zach damn near shot every single frame of the film. Like, we went to the location that we were shooting in, the Cochran House. He and I had tested, we were testing unbleached muslin, like what that did, like bouncing it. We tried book lighting. We tested, a bunch of different techniques. And then we ended up landing on, okay, this is, kind of like the formula. So now let's go into the location and actually test it and see how it reacts within the location. So Zach damn near shot every single frame of the film before we ever, before production even started. Same with I Wish I Could See Heaven. Shot, we tested, we talked. We were talking for, Zach was writing the script, I want to say in July of last year, maybe sooner. But as he was doing it and as he was coming up with the idea, we were talking. Like, he was sending me pages. He was sending me pages whenever he could, and we were constantly talking about it. We're looking at references. We were, talking about, oh man, do we want to do this? Do we want to do that? Do we want to use this lens? Do we want to, like, what do we want this film to say visually? And a lot of it with those films that make it work is what we did prior to, like all the months that we took prior to, before ever, bringing crew and anybody else into it. Like, it's the work that we do beforehand. It's the preparation. It's the mindset. Because when we get on set, the goal is just to execute. Like, we're not trying to figure anything out because we've already figured it out. We're just, like, oh, it's a cloudy day now. Okay, now let's tweak this way.
You also post your lighting diagrams on Instagram, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I remember when I was low-key stalking you, that was something that I was always like, oh, damn. Like, there's a lot of work put into this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not just showing up and putting the camera on.
No.
It's like, and it's really thorough. I mean, if anyone, I would put a link to it, your social media in the captions. I would say check it out if you're interested in that kind of stuff, where like what you do really well is you post like, it's like behind the scenes photos, but you also put like a picture, like it looks like an animation, sort of like an animatic of how you design where the lights are going to go.
Oh yeah.
That stuff. I'm like, the fact that you're just willing to even share that, I think is really sick.
Yeah. I mean, it's I just try to be what I wish I had coming up. You know, I wish I had someone to just, you know, like, hey, I could just go pick your brain and you just tell me everything. Like, because I'll just, you know, if you ask me anything, like, I'll give it up. This is exactly how I did it. I'll show you exactly what I did, why, all that stuff. Because my attitude is, you know, like, I don't like gatekeepers. I try not to be one. And, you know, as a community, you know, if one of us look good, we all look good. So it's important to, you know, not hoard the information, because what are we going to, for what? Like, what are we going to do with it when we, you know, eventually pass on? You know, my attitude is, okay, here, let me show you what I did. And then if you want to know more, I'll tell you more. So that's, you know, like, I just try to be what I wish I had. Like, I wish I had someone to, like, just offer up the info to me. And so if I can be that to someone and just say, hey, this, you know, like, hey, how did you light this thing? Oh, I didn't. What do you mean you didn't light it? I didn't light it. I just put the person here and just, you know, just had them turn this way, and that's it. And sometimes, you know, it's, you know, it's just cool to see, like, people get excited about the work. And that's how I was. Like, when I first got in, like, man, I'm just so excited. But having someone to share the info and show that it is possible is just, you know, like, that's just really, that's fulfilling for me, to show that it's possible, because it is.
I'm glad you said that, because what I really want to know now is, you've spoken a lot about Zach, and I asked Zach on his episode about his, like, creative collaboration with you, and that became misFitted Productions. I'm very curious to know what that first interaction was like with Zach, and what hit off so well that the two of you became, like, best buds, and decided to even open a production company together.
Yeah.
What about that connection worked out so well? So
Zach, I knew of him. I didn't know him before we met. I knew it was around the time of, it was after I did Affliction, the short, and I submitted to Trinity International. And I had kept tabs on Trinity. Like, we had, you know, I don't think I had ever had anything in there officially, but I knew Marshall. Marshall knew who I was. And she was kind of keeping tabs on me. And I would, like, watch what would come from the festival, or what would be in the festival. And Zach had a project in it called You Better Run. And that was the first time I had seen something from him. And when I saw it, I'm like, man, who did this? Like this, I've never seen anything like this made here before. Like, who made this? And some time went by, and I saw the promotion for Little Church in Trinity, because I think that was the year I submitted Affliction, and Zach was doing the premiere of Little Church at Trinity. So I'm like, man, I gotta go. Like, I gotta go see it. And I remember seeing Little Church for the first time and just being like, bro, what? Like, just, I was blown away. Like, I tell him every now and then, I'm like, man, I thought when I saw the crowd at Trinity, like how many people was there, like the environment, and then what y'all made, I'm like, man, this guy is special. I'm like, man, I was a fan. Like, I was like, man, who is this guy? And so we met. I don't remember exactly how we met. I know we met during Trinity. We had done an interview together. I think on the Brenda Perlman show, and he had won the Emerging Filmmaker Award the year prior to me winning it, and so he presented me the award that year.
That's cool.
But we were cool. Like, we had already been kind of communicating before then. And he asked me during that time, if I would want to, work on his next project. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And he's like, yeah, it's about, he told me what it was about. He said, it's called Right On. He sent me the script. I'm like, man, this is dope. Like, what you want me to do? Can you AD? I'm like, okay, yeah, for sure. He's like, yeah, we're going to shoot this on film too. Like, wait, what? You can shoot this on 16 millimeter black and white film. I'm like, oh man, like how you gonna do that? I'm still all new to all of this. And so at that point, that's when we were communicating like frequently, because we were, he had gotten me involved in Right On. And the way that Zach works is, like it's a family environment. So he likes to work with people who he trusts. And so that was like a big thing for me at the time. It's like, man, you trust me to come on board? Like, man, you just did Little Church. Like, what you like? You want me to come on board?
For anyone listening who doesn't know, Little Church caused quite the uproar.
Incredible film. Like that changed. Like that raised the bar so high, and it was just like, yeah, I was a fan. Like I told, like I'm like, man, bro, I don't know if you noticed, like, bro, I was a fan when I first saw Little Church. But we did Right On, and the bonding thing with us came in, it was funny because there was some adversity on Right On. Like we, shooting on film, like there's things that happened on the project. And we bonded because we both got to have a crash course to see how the other person handles pressure and works under duress.
Trauma bonding.
Yeah. I mean, but it really wasn't like, it wasn't a traumatic thing. It was, okay, you're stressed, I'm stressed, we're under pressure, we have to get this done. You get to see my organizational skills, I get to see your creative and organizational skills. So we now see, okay, yeah, we fit. And so the more we talked, and, because we damn near talk every day, like ever since, from that time, like we've talked almost every day. If we go a couple days without talking, like it's, like that's probably the most that we'll do is a couple days. Like I know his son Harper, and like I've been around his family. I know his mom, his brother. Like I've met them. He's met my family. He's, my mom cooks food. She loves cooking food, Jamaican food. He's had her food before. Like, he's met my son, wife. Like he's been, like we're family. Like we've been to each other's houses. So, it started on set. It started with the work, and the relationship just kind of built off, off of set. We just found out that we're, he's a boxing fan, I'm a boxing fan. He loves hip hop, I love hip hop. He's more of a hip hop head than me. I just, like he's more well versed in it than I am, but we both appreciate the same kinds of music. We've got similar taste in film and art. And so it was just, like it started with the work, but it just built organically outside of it. But yeah, Right On was like our first, like, Zach likes to say that was my first test. Like he was, that was a test to see if, see if we could, because he saw Affliction and he thought Affliction was dope. And, it was like the first test to see like, all right, let's see how we mesh. But, it worked out from there. And then, kind of the rest is history. That was, 6 years ago?
Well, misFitted has done some pretty big work.
Yeah.
And I mean, is that, that collaboration, and you guys have continued with it. Mm-hmm. It seems like a lot of good stuff has come from it. And that's why I talked to Zach. I think I said this to him on his episode. I think it was the idea of, you have no idea what the kind of friendships you're going to make, the kind of relationships you'll foster if you just pursue your dreams. Mm-hmm. And like the bond you guys have, it's, it's ideal. It's kind of beautiful what you guys are able to do together. And it's one of those things where I kind of want to hear about, like, I want to call it the boring stuff, mm-hmm. but I don't think it is boring. It's just, it's a shift of the work from the creative to the pay bills. Because a lot of what misFitted done a lot of commercials and stuff. Mm-hmm. And you guys have done some great stuff. I want to know what the process is of finding those clients. Do they find you, or do you and Zach do like pitch decks for these brands?
Yeah, so a lot of that is Zach. He really he really champions a lot of that stuff. Like finding the clients. He had he was working with We the People for a few years. And a lot of like what he learned working with them and just learning from Jesse Ford, and how he ran his agency. Zach kind of took a lot of those lessons and just applied it to misFitted. So a lot of the stuff was, you know, just connecting with different people. You know, we made a, you know, two things that we did recently was a connection. I think he had already known the guy's name's Fran Westbrooks. He runs the Boulevard. It's an agency. It's like one of the few, I think it may be the only Black agency here. But he had a connection with him, and they linked back up together. And you know, he got us working on, you know, got us to go to Kenya to do a trip out there to do some work with Compassion International. It's like a Christian organization that does like sponsoring for, you know, for kids who are kind of in, you know, impoverished situations. And then we did, you know, the spot for HAP Michigan through the Boulevard as well. So a lot of it was, you know, Zach got a deal to work with We the People. He did that for a couple years. And then he just kind of like fostered a lot of those relationships like throughout his time there. Learned a lot from Jesse, and then just, you know, kind of, you know, it was either fostering relationships with people he already knew to say, hey, we can, like, we're misFitted, we offer this, like, we can do this for you. Or it was, you know, going out and meeting someone totally new and say, hey, this is what we have, this is what we can do. Zach's got this experience, you know, working, you know, Rivian and Plant Moran, and he did a spot for Wayne County Health, like, you know, showing those things off, and then really, you know, getting people to go, okay, like, yeah, we'll hire you to do this thing, we'll hire you to do that thing. So, yeah, Zach's been, he's really the champion in that arena, and it all started with just the stuff that he learned from working in commercial with We the People.
I've got 2 questions left.
Yes.
One, you said to me on the phone that you don't really consider yourself a director per se. Mm-hmm. You're more like cool with sticking to the camera.
Yeah.
That is something I find very interesting. Mm-hmm. What about getting your first feature film made was enough for you to be like, you know what, I'm going to stick with the camera? Or are you just waiting until that next great idea finds you?
So I'm going to reference Zach again. If you couldn't tell, like if you didn't know, we talked every day.
It really is the
like,
misFitted part 2.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, he's my big brother. Like you know, Zach has helped me in ways that I don't think he fully realizes. So there was around a time where we were doing Affliction, like before I did Affliction, Zach encouraged me to do a short prior to. And I was kind of reluctant at first, and he said, you know what, Chuck? I said, Chuck, you want to be a director, but when was the last time you directed? And I said, you know, I started bringing up like photography stuff. He's like, no. I'm talking about like film. When was the last time you directed? I'm like, man, it hasn't been since the short. He's like, how long ago was that? It was like 2 years ago. He's like, bro, directors direct. He's like, if you're going to direct, you got to direct. And so we did a short called My Escape right before Affliction. That was like okay, here I am, I'm directing. Like, you can, you know, like it hasn't been 2 years since I did my last thing. You can trust me with your money, basically, to people. Like, you can trust me. Here's a thing. It's newer. Here you go. And then we did Affliction, and then it had been some time after that. And around that time, that's when I was starting to do more DP work. And so the conversation came back up again about directors directing. And Zach said to me, I'll never forget this. I was we were in Ann Arbor. Me and my wife were in Ann Arbor. We're walking around, and Zach hits me with, it's like, Chuck, you should DP full time. And I said, what? And he's like, my master plan is for you to DP full time. And I'm like, man, no, I'm not DPing full time. He's like, why not? I'm like, man, I want to direct. Like, that's where I think my lane is. And, you know, it came back again, directors direct. And then he's like, When's the last time you picked up the camera? I said, yesterday. He's like, there it is, bro. That's your gift. Your gift is behind the camera. And in my head, I'm like, I don't see it. I personally don't see it. And it took me a couple projects. We did The Inheritance together. It's a part of a series of shorts called Darker Than Blue. We did The Inheritance, and The Inheritance got me hired on my biggest job to date at McGraw Ave. We did McGraw Ave. So it was Affliction, The Inheritance, McGraw, and it was like those 3 projects. And then we did the Cliff Bells thing. And I'm like, okay, all right, I think I see it now. All right, I think maybe I should start taking this seriously. So, you know, directing I don't like everything that comes with it, like after the fact and before the fact. It's like I have to live with this project for all this time, and then I have to sell it and maybe someday make some money off of it. Like, it just doesn't feel like for me. Whereas with being a DP, I can get in, I can pour myself into this thing, and then I can kind of, I don't want to say wash my hands of it, but I can pour myself out, and then I can kind of get my life back after, like after we, however I'm involved in post, like I can get my life back after that.
It's a shorter prison sentence.
Yeah, no, it is. And I mean, I'll direct again. Like I have something, written.
I think you should.
That I'll do shorts and
That's
and
rap,
my
guys. We got
I'll do shorts and my passion projects. But I have one feature written. It's about my dad, and that's one that I really want to. I won't pass that off to direct. I really want to do that. But yeah, directing is just like I'm cool with kind of when you DP, you shoot, you have a premiere, and nobody's like shining the light on you. I mean, sometimes they do, but it's not like I don't have to get up there and talk. Like, I don't mind doing that, but I don't have to get up there and be like, oh yeah, man, this, like, cause it's I'm the more I do this, the more I'm cool with just kind of playing behind the scenes. So
I'll tell you this: creativity comes in waves. That's been my experience.
That is true.
And you don't know when it's going to hit you. Sometimes the tide's so low, you just keep walking the sand, and before you know it, there's a tsunami. And I think you go through like that. That happens, and I'm currently in that position. There's a wave coming. Yeah. Jay's gonna laugh at that one, but there's a wave on the horizon, and yeah. So I think I only have one more question, but it's unrelated. It's just back to your introduction. It's something I'm curious about. You pride yourself in being able to photograph black skin. And I would love to, if you could give us maybe your 3 best tips for anyone out there who's probably struggling with that, how they can improve their photography. That'd be something I'd be very curious to learn about. I know there's a lot more into it.
Yeah,
just the 3 basic things.
Best, yeah.
So if you're behind the camera, you're like, what am I doing wrong? You can just run through a quick little list.
So that's one thing that I really pride myself on, because I didn't know how to do it myself. Like when I was coming up, because when I was taking pictures and stuff like that, like I would always, shoot fair skin, models, when I was doing photography, like I wasn't photographing black people consistently. So when I started to do it and realized like, oh, this takes a different set of spice, that's when, like once it clicked, it's like, okay, this is, like I'm really proud of this. So I think first thing is exposure is your best tool. I was just on the way here, I was just having a conversation with someone about using exposure as a tool. You don't always have to just set the camera or set the lens to an exposure or set your ND or whatever. Like you can use like just how this light right here is hitting me in a certain way. Like if you just expose for how the camera on the opposite side and you expose for whatever this side is doing and you let everything naturally fall off, you don't need a bunch of other modifiers or things like that to create contrast. So black skin will create contrast if you expose properly. Two, black skin is reflective. White skin's absorbent. So if I, hit you with a color like red or orange, your skin's just gonna absorb all of that and you're gonna turn that color. But if you put red or orange on me, my skin's just gonna, it's just gonna kind of bounce off like that. And it's gonna kind of look like, rather than absorbing into my skin and me turning red, I'm gonna have like an accent, like right here, wherever you put that light. So that's another thing. And I think that part is really important. Because it just informs so many different decisions on, especially with color lighting, when you use color, like you still need a regular source to expose properly. But if you want to add color, you can do so, because color is not going to give you exposure. It's just going to bounce right back off. Man, what's another one?
Bring us home. One more. If I can make it easier, what's usually like the biggest mistake you see other than exposure and color? And you can name and shame a Hollywood production.
Yeah,
if you want
I think exposure is
that's the cardinal
I think
sin.
exposure is the biggest one. And I think, and this has nothing to do with anything technical. I think this is more managerial, like a soft skill thing. But I think it's important for anyone who, so let's say you come to me and you say, hey, Charles, how do I expose someone who's black, right? Like if I, show you and tell you how to do it, like that's, like you have to be comfortable in that. It's not really a situation where like, oh man, if I underexpose you, it's going to be offensive. Like, no, it's not. It's not an offensive thing because, like I'm telling you like, hey, this is how you do it. And if you say, oh man, don't we need more light? Like, no, like that's the essence of our skin. So for you to get information from someone who's actually black to say like, hey, this is how you photograph us, I think there's nothing, like, don't think of it as like, oh, I'm being offensive if I, underexpose or this, when someone who's telling me how to do it is actually black. Like that, I think that's something that I see and I hear quite frequently lately. And it's like, no, like it's not, there's no political correctness in that part when someone is telling you like, hey, this is how you do it. If that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense.
I think it does. No, that's why I was curious. I really wanted to get that on here before we concluded. I think it was something that I was very interested in. It's just your perspectives. It's just, I think it's a mandatory thing now because there's been like, in my own experience, I've worked with a lot of people of color. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's something that I've had to run into where I'm like, damn, I think I am doing this wrong. So how do I improve?
I think the third thing, like the official third thing that I could say is preserve the skin tones.
Yeah. The one thing I didn't like is we had no lights. That's the problem. And so what we would do is we try to put a lot of compensation, put a lot of other lights. Yeah. And then I just ended up with these very, very bright, washed out images. And I was like, there's no romance to this image. There's nothing yummy. There's nothing like, Yeah. The contrast is yum.
Contrast is your friend. Contrast is your friend. The images that I've seen of black skin that are off-putting are the ones where the skin looks gray because there's just no contrast anywhere. Contrast is your friend. Don't be afraid of those purples on the false color. Like purple is fine.
You see? And that's why I was like, I want to ask you. And that's why I don't feel worried. And I don't feel like it is a PC thing. I'm like, if I'm going to ask anyone, I'd like to ask the master and then see if I can improve there.
I'm still figuring it out.
You were the first search result. Hush. Charles Kennedy Jr., folks. It was a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah. This is kind of surreal, but just overall, I feel very honored to have this conversation with you.
And this is cool. This is really cool for me because it's, just, I don't think realize how much this means for me too. So I appreciate you.
You've had an impact, sir.
Thank you.
All right, guys, that was Let's Talk Motion Picture. This podcast is brought to you by Motion Picture Institute, a film school located in Troy, Michigan. If you'd like to know more about our extensive one-year filmmaking program, please check out the website at motionpicture.edu and schedule a tour today.